Mic check 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and I am excited about Switch collecting in 2025 and kind of changing up my collecting style. We have 5 days left in 2024, and as many of you know, I've spent the majority of this year solely collecting for retro games. Now, it doesn't mean that I haven't picked up some modern games. Many of you know this year I picked up a PlayStation 5. It was the 30th anniversary PlayStation 5. I also picked up a handful of Switch games. And on top of that, I picked up my first PlayStation 5 game in Stellar Blade. So that was a lot of fun. But for the most part, if you've been following the channel throughout the year, it's been primarily retro pickups for me. And I just wanted to take a quick minute to talk about the differences in collecting for retro and collecting for current gen games, and how current gen games are actually much easier to collect for than retro games, at least in my experience. And when you first look at retro games, there's a lot of challenges in collecting retro games. The first challenge is the most obvious, so let's get it out the way, and it's price. Price for collecting retro games can be very, very difficult depending on the types of games that you're going for, right? If you're going for some of the more rare games, if you're going for like kind of niche titles, those can get pretty pricey. And the tough part about retro games is that because they're only sold in specialized stores, or you can only find them online, or if you're lucky, you find them at a thrift store or something, there's really not about a lot of opportunity for you to get any type of discounts. It's very rare that, a copy of Grandia 2 is going to go on sale for 30% off or anything like that. It's really up to the seller whether or not they decide to give you any type of discount, which is why usually most retro game collectors and game hunters, they decide to hit the mom and pop shops on Black Friday, because that's the one day in the year that they know that most mom and pop shops are going to offer some type of buy two get one, some type of 25 or 30% off. That's the one day that retro game collectors can bank on retro games going on sale at most, if not all, mom and pop game stores. So that's that pricing challenge is definitely a huge challenge. Now, just to go back to the whole thrift store thing, yes, you can get lucky and find a really expensive retro game at a thrift store, or at a flea market, or at a yard sale. But now you're investing a ton of time into retro game hunting. And if you value time, if you put a price tag or a dollar amount on the time that you spend game hunting, that can also become very costly, right? It can become costly to you from a time value perspective. So game hunting is just very difficult pricing wise. Then let's say you do find the game. Now you have to haggle. The haggle factor in game collecting and game hunting, haggling for the game, the amount of competition, right, in trying to acquire certain games, because there's a limited number of these games, and every year these games get more and more limited, because every year a copy of your favorite game gets broken, it gets lost, it gets damaged, it stops working, it gets scratched. And so every year the number of games, of retro games in circulation, just reduces and reduces and reduces. So which also contributes to the pricing factor. So you have those challenges when it comes to collecting retro games, with pricing, with finding the games, with sourcing the games, haggling for the games, spending a lot of time looking for the games. And it's a big part of the reason why a lot of people have actually stopped retro collecting. A lot of people have stopped hunting for retro games. In fact, a lot of times when I even post a retro video, a lot of the comments that I see are people who have either just completely stopped hunting for retro games, who have completely either gone digital, or they're not interested in the work that it takes to actually acquire good retro games. So people have turned away from that. And while in 2025, I'm not going to say that I'm going to completely abandon retro game collecting. Like, if I'm in the wild and I see a good retro game, I'm going to pick it up. Or if I see a deal anywhere, whether it be online, in a store, whatever, I'm going to still pick up the game if it's a game that I don't have in my collection already. But I'm no longer going to be actively seeking those games. I'm not going to be hunting for retro games. That's not going to be the focus of my collecting strategy in 2025. It's going to be more returning back to the Switch and maybe a little bit of PlayStation 4. I was, prior to this year, so like in 2023-ish, 2022, I was definitely more on a PlayStation 4 Switch kick, but I think in 2025 it's really going to be more focused on Switch, Nintendo, and building up that aspect of my collection. I sold a lot of Switch games at the beginning of 2024, and even at the end of 2023. I probably sold somewhere around 250 to 300 Switch games, and they were like 80% of those games were like niche rare titles, like limited run titles, like strictly limited titles, like super rare, a lot of stuff that you're just not going to see on the shelf. So I'm not even going to attempt to try to collect all that stuff back, because a good chunk of those games at this point are ridiculously expensive. So it's going to be not fun for my wallet. For that, I might as well just keep on retro collecting. But my main thing when it comes to collecting for the Switch is really just taking advantage of the better pricing. Collecting for the Switch is going to be a lot cheaper for me, primarily because most of the Switch games that I like are indie titles, and so those games usually, they retail at about $29.99 to $34.99. So they're going to be cheaper than a lot of the retro games that I was looking for. Um, so that's a good thing. The second thing is that Switch games actually go on sale because they're sold at major retailers. So that's the good thing, is that, even if I'm picking up a new Switch game, there is a chance that I could get it on sale. A good example is the Marvel vs. Capcom collection. That game launched at $50, but then like less than 2 months later, it was discounted to $35. And that's the beauty of being able to collect for current gen games, because you can actually bank on stores having sales. You can get coupons. It's easier to find deals on the Switch, especially going into 2025, because the Switch 2 is coming out. So we don't know how the release of the Switch 2 is going to impact the current gen of Switch games. We don't know if the games that are made for the Switch 2 will actually say like Switch 2 on them, or if they're just going to continue to use this current format for Switch games. We don't know what it's going to look like. I would assume that if they do change up the format and actually go with a different style and maybe get rid of this whole red, spine, and actually do something different and actually showcase, more game art. I don't know how they're going to do it, but if they do change that up, I can only assume that it's going to definitely impact the pricing of Switch games. Some Switch games are going to shoot up in value. Some Switch games are going to drop in value. And we're going to see probably a liquidation on some Switch games, probably some of your more common games and things like that. But we already know that the Mario games are going to stay the same. Prices for those games will never change. But your indie titles are the ones that are probably get changed up in terms of pricing. So, um, you know, I'm excited about collecting for the Switch for the pricing. Also, I'm excited about collecting for the Switch because it's just going to be easier to find and source these games. It's going to be so much easier to find Switch games, especially new Switch games that are coming out. We've gotten a lot of information about releases coming in 2025. I've got my eye on a couple of Switch games that I'm super excited about. Ninja Gaiden Outrage or Outburst. I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically the new 2D Ninja Gaiden game that's going to be released, and it's being made by the same folks who made Blasphemous. That doesn't come out until May, so I've got some time. I got a ways to pick that one up, but I'm super stoked about getting that in my collection. That's going to hit my collection immediately. I do have some catching up to do. I do plan on getting certain Switch games back into my collection, some Switch games that I let go of. There are some ones that I do want to get back. There are some Switch games that I want to just get in general. 2024 was a difficult year because I saw a lot of games come out for the Switch that I just did not buy. Like I just had to ignore because I had to stick to my focus of retro collecting. I mean, when the Rocket Knight collection came out, you don't think I wanted to get that? Man, I really want. I think I even made a video about that, and I never got it because I was like, I'm not collecting for the Switch. So I missed out on the Rocket Knight collection. I missed out on the Dominus collection for Castlevania with all the Castlevania DS games. I want to get Steel Assault back into my physical collection. There are a lot of games that I want to get back into my collection, but I'm gonna slowly get a lot of those, indie games back into my Switch collection and just slowly work on some of the games that are going to be coming out. I'll take you along for the ride when it comes to building back up the Switch collection. Right now, I'm at about 65 to 70 Switch games, so it's still a sizable Switch collection for sure. But it's a huge drop from where I was. Like I said, I was like at 350, maybe even close to 400 Switch games. So I got rid of a lot of stuff. Um, I'm pretty satisfied and happy with a lot of the retro stuff that I got. I checked off a lot of things off of my wish list this year, in terms of consoles, in terms of games. There's still a few that I want to get, but the ones that I want to get are pretty darn pricey. I think I've told you all some of the games on my wish list for retro. One of them being Popful Mail, the other one being KO Flying Squadron, and Hagane. Those are some of my like wish list titles, along with Super Turrican 2, um, Captain Commando, also on the NES, is another one, and just a few. There's a few, like maybe about 10 that are still on my wish list for retro, but I know I'm not gonna find those in the wild, or it's very, very unlikely that I find those in the wild. I'm really gonna have to look for them. It'll be a challenge, but I'm gonna get back to Switch collecting because I think it'll be easier on the wallet. It'll be easier time wise because I won't have to spend as much time hunting. Even though I don't feel like I spent a ton of time hunting for retro. A lot of the stuff that I found this year, I literally walked into them. Found a lot of them at GameStop. I have to admit, I found a lot of retro games at GameStop. Um, and I was able to do a couple deals, a couple trades, a lot of trades this year, trade a lot of huge trades to get a lot of really cool stuff in the collection. So we'll see what happens in 2025, but I'm excited to get back to Switch collecting, and we'll see how the collection grows during 2025 and what it looks like at the end of the year. But let me know what you think down in the comments. What Switch titles are you excited about in 2025? And I'll catch you in the next video. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.